And it consisted of a large number of these Boolean rules. So if this is true, and this is true, and this is true, then this. And people would populate these. They would get experts in. They'd bring in doctors. Doctors would populate all of these. And then they evaluated it, and they found that it did as well, or actually slightly better than a typical physician. Nobody used it, though. Then much later, in 1984, and still going, there was the psych project. So when I was a kid, this is what you saw when you read about artificial intelligence, which was you put some people in a room, and they start putting in prepositions or axioms. And those are just things that are true about the world. Like, if you can buy something, what can you buy? Well, you can buy a tangible thing. You can buy a service thing. You can rent something. Okay, what services can I buy? Well, you can buy a commercial flight. You can buy non-commercial flight. I don't know. Tangibly, you can buy mouthwash. You can buy food, whatever. And the idea at the time was that if we just make this thing big enough and fill this with enough rules, then we'll be able to encode all knowledge, and then we'll have general world knowledge, which can be used to make a computer that's as intelligent as a human. The problem was in doing this, a lot of times the rules you encode don't apply every time to new situations. So you think that you've encoded something clearly and formally for one situation. When you look at another one, it doesn't work there. And one example from like the medical domain is if I say, what is sodium? Well, what is sodium? I mean, it can be an element. It can be the reading in someone's blood. It can be part of a medication. So it can occur in all these different roles, and it can be difficult to disambiguate which role it is. And so you don't know how to map into this big ontology, and then you can end up, you get ontological drift and all these problems that mean that you're not really using the concepts in the right way. You also have a grounding problem where these are all just terms, and we'll see that a little later on, that the computer doesn't really understand what any of these things mean. These are just words that it's manipulating. And so it means it lacks a lot of knowledge that that is implicit or we take for granted. So then came the AI winter, or winters. I had a little trouble finding out when the AI winter was, because people disagree on this. And I've heard researchers I've worked with, the older guys usually, talking about back in the day with the AI winter, and they usually mean whenever it was they didn't get funding. But generally the consensus was it was either in the early 70s when there were a number of large projects which failed, and they were funded by the government, and they would be things like machine translation for Russian, for other things. And so ARPA cut back on the funding for all of these AI projects. Another one people talk about is in the late 80s when Lisp machines went out of business. And Lisp machines was maybe the canonical example of expert